I swear I thought things were going to get so explosive in the Diddy trial today that there'd be like tears and explosions and, you know, a call for a mistrial over the way a witness was being cross-examined, because it's a really important witness. And I can say this, bending one's own preferences or goals or attitudes to find common ground with your husband or your wife or your partner or your lover, that is generally considered to be a sign of a healthy relationship. Think we can agree on that? But in the Diddy trial, it could be proof of racketeering and maybe even sex trafficking or both. A witness that's being identified only as Jane was back on the stand today, and no doubt she was bracing for the hell, you know, that we all expected, like this vigorous cross-examination that was going to put her through the paces, probing like the thin and the blurry line between free will and coercion. Jane was part of Diddy's life and vice versa. They were lovers for 3 years, and today, I don't know, this is hard. I was kind of stunned when she said it. She said she still loved Diddy. She loved him then and still loves him today, after everything we have heard that she's been through. But she said she did not understand going in what that love would cost her. She said that she broke her own boundaries with so-called hotel nights, right? That's the other term for freak-offs that we heard with Cassie, the other girlfriend who went through it, she said. Just to be the girlfriend that Diddy wanted. She said she didn't know what it was going to take and got in too deep too fast. Confronted with her own text messages and voice messages in which she said she didn't mind those hotel nights, freak-offs, Jane said that that was to keep Diddy from feeling rejected. The defense pointed out that Jane sometimes arranged those escorts and those like super kinky nights herself. To which Jane said, quote, "I knew there was an undertone, an expectation of me," end quote. And if it sounded like she was addicted to Sean Diddy Combs, it is entirely possible he may have been just as hooked on her. Because in a voicemail that jurors heard today, he called Jane, and I quote, again, these are his words, he called her the crack pipe, adding, quote, "That's my new name for you, crack pipe. Call you CP," end quote. Takes all kinds. Team Diddy also introduced texts between Jane and a woman identified only as KK. But if you've been following our coverage, that is presumably Diddy's former chief of staff, Christina Coram. Christina with a K, Coram with a K. The two talked about booking flights and arranging to carry drugs to Miami. I'll get back to that in a moment, because as I do the TikTok on what the law requires in racketeering, yeah, you know, you shouldn't be using your staff, if this is what happened, to be arranging drug deals. Jane testified that she also had a phone call with KK to coordinate that drug delivery. Again, if you're keeping score, this could be considered drug trafficking, and that is one of the predicate acts to racketeering. And the feds are now calling Christina Coram a, quote, co-conspirator, though for now she hasn't been charged. But ouch if you are her. Here's what I think is going on in the background. And again, this is me. I think she's been doing a lot of talking to the feds, trying to figure out with her attorneys, what do I do now? As in right effing now. Because if she's not getting immunity, because they said she's going to testify, she'll be charged with all the things that you're hearing the witnesses testify to. And I wouldn't want to take my chances. But speaking of drugs, Jane admitted that she chose ecstasy over cocaine and ketamine. She has an immunity deal too, Jane does. And when asked about her power to approve or reject certain sex workers, Jane said that sometimes she preferred the familiar ones to the unknown ones. Jane admitted that even now, Diddy pays her rent, a whopping $10,000 a month, and that he is still paying her legal fees, even though she stopped meeting with Diddy's lawyers, right? Eventually she said, I don't think I'm being honest to the truth. I think these are her words. I'm not being honest to the truth. I'm you know, being loyal to him and not to the truth. So she stopped meeting with Diddy's lawyers, but he's still paying her legal bills. She said during their 3-year relationship, Diddy wired her $150,000 and invested $20,000 in her clothing line. Jane also admitted that she was jealous of the gifts that he was apparently buying for other women, you know, like expensive things like a Chanel bag. Diddy's lawyer asked about a bag that Jane was gifted. And here's what the lawyer asked. What is a Bottega bag? To which Jane fired back, I'm sure you have one. And then the lawyer asked how much such a bag costs. And Jane snapped back, how much does my body cost? So, you know, whoa, that's kind of fiery stuff. Jane testified that she enjoyed taking care of Diddy, including bathing him and massaging his feet, and that she did not want to judge his desires then and now, even though she says she wants to understand them. She said at one point she researched why he liked to watch her having sex with other men, and that she concluded he may have, quote, been bi-curious, that he was unwilling to satisfy such bi-curiosity directly. I'm paraphrasing, but these are her words under oath. My guest was in the courtroom for all of this. Armon Wiggins is a journalist and an author who moved to New York just to cover this trial, so that is commitment. He breaks this all down on his YouTube show and his podcast, The Armon Wiggins Show. Armon, I have said this before, I'll say it again. I think you have a really, really great insight that a lot of people are missing in this trial, which is why I'm going to ask you back early and often. So give me a little bit of a lowdown on Jane. Like, I feel like something really changed today.
Listen, today was explosive for me just because up until this point, I didn't know how to take Jane because I just felt like, okay, she was very emotionally charged through the prosecution testimony. But today we saw a different Jane. She was ready. She was ready for the defense. And to me, by far, she was the most poised, testimony that went against the defense in this trial. Like, to me, she showed credibility.
Okay, so here's what I want to ask you. Because when you don't have cameras in the courtroom and you're relegated to accepting these chalk drawings, it makes me crazy. Because there's so much that comes through in communication through nuance that you can't put on the printed page. And all the reporters are doing an amazing job. But it's not the same as your two eyes, because you're watching it, you're feeling it. I got the sense from reading a lot about this that Jane was this soft-spoken, very vulnerable witness and very believable, sobbing, gasping, like trying to get her breath, ugly crying on the stand, up until today, when suddenly she is mad AF and is showing a different side that maybe the jury will think, was I being played the last 3 days?
You know, I don't think that that's what that was. I think that she showed strength because the defense has had a reputation of breaking down every witness that's came up there until today. I think that she literally drove that cross today, and I think she did a great job. For me, it was one of those things that because the defense was trying to make it seem as though she had control over the freak-offs and she was in on that, I think that her job today was to say, hey, listen, I'm not going to hide from the fact that I love Diddy, that I'm still in love with Diddy, that I cared about him. I did care about him. I do care about him. He still pays my bills. I don't want to be here. I care about this guy. But let's be very clear here. I know that there's an undertone to the things that he asks me. So when you guys are reading these things off a piece of paper or you guys are reading these text messages, understand that I'm looking at these from a different lens. So when he tells me be explicit or when he tells me set it up, that's not just me setting it up because I want to. It's me setting it up because, listen, I'm dating a millionaire, a billionaire, a man with a lot of power. He's arrogant. He's narcissistic. He's controlling. And at the end of the day, I'm trying to have a good time. I love this guy, but if I tell him I don't want to do something, I know that the whole day is going to be ruined. The mood is going to be ruined. And then he might threaten to break up with me, which entails he's no longer going to pay this $10,000 rent. So you know what? Our whole relationship is based on this fantasy thing that we do. So when he starts saying, talk to me, lead me, I want you to show me what you got with it, that means engage. Let's talk about the freak-offs. Let's talk about other men, because ultimately that's what you want to get to. Diddy had an affinity for other men and watching her have sex with other men, period. And she knew that. And the way to get close with him, to feed his ego, to give him what he wanted, and to keep the peace, she fed into it.
So, but here's the thing. There are a lot of relationships like that, right? Does it rise to the level of sex trafficking and racketeering is the issue for this jury. So to that, I ask you, and by the way, great insight, because I had a totally different lens having read it, so thank you for this. But what I want to know is, last week when you and I spoke, you got the sense, kind of like I did, that this was somebody who just wanted a really nice apartment and that she was going through with all these awful things to keep a really nice apartment. And to me, that's not sex trafficking. And you seem to have that same sense. Did you change your mind given what I thought was going to be a withering cross-examination today?
I did, because I feel like she controlled the whole testimony, because when the defense would try to, set up and say, well, you set these things up and you like the freak off. She said, no, I liked being with him. We did the freak offs because that was part of the culture. That is what we did. But let's be clear here. It's not just me setting this up. He asked me to take charge. This is why I did these things. I personally feel that Jane is more credible today, because she was very confident. She was poised in her delivery. She even got sassy. She fired back. And I think that she knows what she wanted. Listen, and she didn't shy away again from the fact that, yes, I liked him. I loved him. I would still be with him today, but at the end of the day, I didn't know that I was going to be introduced to this lifestyle. And so what they're trying to get him on is sex trafficking by fraud. And I think the fraud part is the materialized thing that he promised her. You're going to be my boyfriend. You're going to be my boyfriend. We're going to go on trips. I'm going to buy you nice things. Those things never happened and then when they did happen, she was met with a freak off.
Listen, you are great. It's so helpful to have your perspective and your eyes on, because like I said, perception can be so different when you're just trying to get it through like the spoken word. I'm going to go on my soapbox again, Armon. Cameras in the courtroom. It's just crazy not to have them. Will you come back again?
Yes. Let me tell you something. Thank you so much for keep having me on here. I'm having a great time, and you're such a great person. And shout out to everyone and your team. Thank you.
Right back at you, Armon Wiggins. Thank you for that. It's the Armon Wiggins Show. Check it out on YouTube. It's one of the best channels for coverage, along with mine. Thank you, Armon. I'll see you again soon. I now want to bring in a defense attorney and former prosecutor, Mark Eiglarsh. Okay, so you heard what Armon said. She owned the courtroom today. She got sassy. Gone was the soft-spoken witness who seemed so vulnerable. What are your thoughts about that?
That's normal. Listen, these are softball questions on direct examination. You can't really judge a witness until you're watching cross-examination. And then their true nature comes out. And either when I cross-examine a witness, they go down to Chinatown, right? You see the bias, the motive, the interest, the conflicts in their testimony. Or, like this rare witness, she stood up to the defense. I mean, these are not rookie lawyers. She stood up to them, and apparently, if you believe what Mr. Wiggins said, she came off believable and credible.
Yeah, so here's my question for you, and it all comes back to the law and what the jury is going to see in this witness when they apply the law, which is what they're supposed to do in deliberations. And I keep coming back to, she didn't want to lose her $10,000 a month apartment. God, I wish I had a $10,000 a month apartment. Will the jury see this as someone who just wanted luxury perks, or will the jury see this as someone whose livelihood, whose shelter, whose food was going to get cut off by a guy who was insisting on sex, i.e. sex trafficking?
Yeah, here's the answer. You ready? I don't know. Neither does anybody, because it hinges upon whether these jurors, each individual jurors, and then collectively when they deliberate, whether they find one C word versus the other. Consent or coercion. It's one or the other, right? And right, oh, there we go. And that's why Dawn Hughes, psychologist Dawn Hughes, was so critical to explain how somebody like Cassie or this witness or the other stays in a relationship when they don't want to be involved in these abhorrent acts. If jurors understand that psychology, then prosecutors have a chance.
I was so worried about the C word that we'd have an FCC violation, so thank you for keeping us clean. Last question, and it's only about a 20-second answer here because I'm running out.
Come on. Yes.
I had a feeling. I had a feeling. Okay, so then the big story that, you know, he was allegedly beating her, breaking down doors, and there's evidence to that. Like, there's corroborative text messages, like, you need to pay for the broken down doors.
Yeah.
That changed things for me. That changed this to something more along the lines of Cassie's descriptions, which I was terrified. I was fearful, which brings me to the coercion. Do you think that that brings the case closer towards coercion and fear and maybe sex trafficking, because there is that terror?
Yeah, it can be, absolutely. And more importantly, they continue to find reasons every day to hate this man. Normally, character evidence should not come in at all, but it's so intertwined with this case. Keep in mind, though, prosecutors have a tall order. They have to prove that this guy was the Al Capone of the lube world. It's not just that he's a bad guy. They've got to show these acts. So was it coercion? If it was, you've got sex trafficking potentially, along with the other drug crimes and the other things they're alleging. If those are proven, then they've got a shot.
If the lawyers on this case are watching, they are writing down Al Capone of the lube world as we speak. Mark Eiglarsh, thank you for being such a wordsmith, and thank you for being my guest tonight.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.